Hi, everyone. My name is Nisha Ramachandran. I'm the Policy Director with NCAPA, the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we're a coalition of 34 national Asian Pacific American organizations, and we serve to represent the interests of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, and to provide a national voice for our community's concerns. We have 5 policy committees that focus on civil rights, immigration, education, health, and housing and economic justice. Today's webinar on protecting DACA and advancing DREAM is brought to you by NCAPA's Immigration Committee. And so I want to give credit to also the following members and co-sponsors of our webinar today. That's NAPOF, the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, SALT, South Asian Americans Leading Together, OPCHO, the Association of Asian Pacific American Health Organizations, CIRAC, the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates, NAPABA, the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, APALA, the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, NAFA, the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, and NACSEC, the National Korean American Service and Education Consortium.
So before we get started today, just a few logistics reminders for folks. When you did register for this webinar, you should have been given a unique audio pin. So I just want to stress that when you did dial in today, that you used your pin. At the end of the webinar, we'll be facilitating a Q&A discussion. And if you're interested in asking a question, you'll see that in your GoToWebinar, there's a place to kind of raise your hand. So if you're interested in asking a question verbally, just raise your hand and we can unmute you. The other option as well is if you prefer to type in questions, you'll see that in your GoToWebinar panel, there is a section that says chat. So feel free to just direct your chat questions to the webinar organizers. And we welcome you to type in questions. You don't have to wait till the Q&A portion. You could do it throughout the webinar as we present. And then lastly as well, please make sure that you are logged onto the webinar itself so you can see the presentation slides as the presenters go through their discussion points. With that, I'll turn it back to Nisha.
Thanks. I just want to introduce our speakers for today. First, we have Katrina Dizon-Mariategui, she's the Immigration Policy Manager at CIRAC. Angela Matai, the DACA Outreach Lead at NAFA. Megan Essaheb, the Assistant Director of Immigration Policy at Advancing Justice AAJC, Kamua, the Associate Director of Policy and Advocacy at OCA Asian Pacific American Advocates, and Suk-Young Oh, the DC Area Director for NACSEC. I'm going to go over the agenda very quickly for the call, and then we'll jump right into it. First, we'll have Katrina go do a quick overview of the DACA program. Angela will talk about the impacts to the API community. Megan will talk about the attacks on DACA and what's at stake. Kam will then go into the 2017 DREAM Act. Suk-Young will then continue with the national, state, and local strategy as well as a call to action. I will share some resources, and then we will have time for some questions and answers with our panelists.
Great, thank you, Nisha. So this is Katrina again with CIRAC. Before we get started, we wanted to take a quick poll of folks on the line. We sent this invitation out through our various listservs, and we got a lot of interest from folks, but we kind of want to gauge where folks are coming from. So if you can see on your screen, we would love it if you could tell us where you're from, either the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, or the West. And as folks put in their answers, well, we'll display the answer after a few seconds. So just we got to gauge where people are calling in from. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. So let's close the poll and see the results. Can you see the results? Sorry. Oh, here we go. So results, it seems that we have, wow, a good number from the Midwest and the West, about 30%, 25% from the Northeast, and about 17% from the South. It's a really great representation. The next question that we wanted to ask folks is, so, do you know anybody, in your family, in your community, or yourself included, do you know anyone that would be directly impacted in the event if DACA were repealed? We'll give folks a few seconds to answer that question, and then we'll share that out as well. All right, a few more seconds. Folks can get those answers in. Okay, let's close up the poll and look at the results. So we have about almost 10% that says they know somebody that would be directly impacted. About 55% said no, but they know families and friends that would, or no, but I want to learn more is about 36%. So as you guys can see, it's really great because everybody here really does want to learn more about how to protect DACA and really how to advance DREAM. And it's important to note that this really does have immense impact on the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. So with that, we wanted to talk a little bit about, DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which I'm sure a lot of you on the phone today have heard of. DACA was introduced in 2012 by President Obama as a way to address inaction he saw from Congress around comprehensive immigration reform. It was introduced via executive order together with guidelines that outlined the administration's priorities for deportation in an attempt to use limited enforcement resources to focus on the removal of those deemed threats to their community. This program allowed certain young undocumented immigrants to receive a renewable 2-year work permit, an exemption from deportation, and the following were the criteria that had to be met to qualify for the program. So it was for those that were under the age of 31, came to the United States under the age of 16, continuously resided in the country from June 2007, were in school, graduated high school, obtained a GED, or honorably just discharged from armed forces, not convicted of any felonies or significant misdemeanors, and not a threat to national security. And to date, there are nearly 800,000 DACA recipients in the country, and this includes many Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. In 2014, President Obama proposed an expansion of this DACA program that would eliminate the age cap and also extend work authorization from 2 to 3 years. He also announced DAPA, or the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residents, which granted deportation protection and a 3-year work permit also for undocumented parents of U.S. citizen children and lawful permanent residents for those that have been in the country since 2010. So unfortunately, following the lawsuits filed by several states and the Supreme Court failing to reach a decision, these programs have been placed on hold. So with that, I wanted to hand you over to my fellow panelist, Angela Mapai of NAPA, to tell us a little bit more on the impacts of DACA on the AAPI community.
Thank you, Katrina, for setting the stage and laying out the DACA requirements. In the next 2 slides, I wanted to provide the context regarding the potential impact the repeal of DACA could have on the AAPI undocumented immigrant community. First, it is important to note that Asian undocumented immigrants account for about 14% of the total undocumented population in the United States, and about 1 out of every 7 Asian immigrants is undocumented. Nationally, there are about 1.5 million undocumented AAPIs, with the largest concentration of AAPI undocumented immigrants located in the following states: California, New York, Texas, New Jersey, and Illinois. Among those who are currently undocumented, there are about 136,000 AAPIs who are DACA eligible from the following countries: Korea, China, India, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, which is based on the most recent United States Citizenship and Immigration Services DACA data set, not all those who are DACA eligible have applied for the program. However, there are about 40,000 AAPI DACA grantees that would be affected were DACA to be repealed. As a disclaimer, these numbers are only reflective of application statistics from the top Asian countries of origin, and it excludes other Asian countries like China and Vietnam, which have a large DACA eligible population, but don't have a high number of DACA enrollees. As such, it is likely that a greater number of AAPI DACA grantees would be a larger number of AAPI DACA grantees would be affected were DACA to be repealed and would throw many of their lives in crisis. The last point I'd like to make here is that the undocumented AAPI community in the United States is large and diverse, and thus it is imperative that as the Trump administration decides whether to phase out or defend DACA, it needs to consider and understand the effect their decision would have on one of the fastest growing racial groups in the United States today. Thank you very much, and next slide.
Okay, we're now going to go to Megan to talk about the attacks on DACA and what's at stake.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Megan Essahab with Advancing Justice AAJC. So you've probably followed somewhat the back and forth on DACA when this president was elected. So when Trump came in, we weren't sure what he was going to do with DACA, and then he sort of said, well, we'll just leave it in place for now. I still haven't made a decision. Then they, a couple months ago, rescinded the DAPA memo, and they didn't rescind the DACA memo. They've also referenced the DACA memo in a couple enforcement memos, and so we were hoping that they were deciding to keep the program, but at the same time, the far-right groups, restrictionist anti-immigrant groups like the Center for Immigration Studies, Numbers USA, and FAIR were criticizing the president and their followers and pushing him to end DACA. So then that brings us to this last month when 10 Republican, well, led by Attorney General Paxton in Texas, 10 Republican attorney generals and one governor of Idaho threatened to sue the administration if they don't phase out the DACA program by September 5th. So I think the way it was written, what that would mean would be to stop issuing renewals of DACA and new DACA applications, and probably most likely allow the current DACA to run its course. So say somebody has another year on their DACA and their work authorization, let that run out. So we don't know what the administration is going to do. Right after that letter was sent, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, members of Congress and senators met with then Secretary of Homeland Security Kelly, who said that he defers to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, about whether or not the program is legal, and it's up to him, which isn't right. I mean, it's the Homeland Security's decision, but it was very troubling because we know Jeff Sessions doesn't like DACA, nor does he think it's legal. So that was a really bad sign. But we haven't heard definitively what the administration wants to do. Their choices are to defend the lawsuit, which would be to say that the program is legal, which is not, a lot of Republicans have not taken that, most Republicans have not taken that position. They've said it's illegal. and or to end the program, or to let the lawsuit run its course but not defend it, which would mean most likely pretty quickly the judge in Texas would block the program from continuing to be in place. So I should have said what they're trying to do is really pick up their lawsuit, their DACA lawsuit in Texas v. US, and add a claim that DACA is illegal. And why that's relevant is because that judge was particularly unfriendly to immigrants, and so they can predict that where he would go in blocking DACA from continuing. So there is some litigation going on as well, because MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, it did intervene to participate in that lawsuit, and so they just recently filed a motion to dismiss to try to end the lawsuit before they can add the claim on DACA. So there's some litigation that's going to be ongoing, and we're going to wait and see on that. But I think the most troubling prospect is that the Trump administration just chooses itself to phase out the program. So, you know, Angelo talked about the impact on people. Close to 800,000 people could lose their work authorization, lose their jobs, and then be vulnerable to being deported. It could also be a loss of $433.4 billion in GDP over a decade. You know, it's a great economic benefit to have these folks working in the formal economy, obviously, and making money, paying taxes, and buying things. The survey data consistently shows that people support continuing the DACA program. 78% of American voters support giving Dreamers the chance to stay permanently in America, including 73% of Trump supporters. So it's just a reminder that it's really a small minority, a minority of even Trump supporters who are pushing to end this program. But it's also important to note that that minority is really loud and vocal. And, you know, we talked to members, staff of members of Congress and senators, they get a lot of phone calls from people, anti-immigrant people, on not just this issue, but all the issues. So I think it's really important on our side to make sure that we're turning up the volume and showing up in defense of DACA. Thanks.
We're now going to go to Kamua from OCA to talk about the 2017 DREAM Act.
So the DREAM Act is a bill that has sort of continuously been introduced in Congress to provide a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, or essentially young folks who have been brought to the U.S. When they were children and who, do not have legal status. So recently, Senator Graham and Senator Durbin introduced the 2017 DREAM Act. Congress members Roy Ball, Allard, and Ross Layton also introduced a House companion bill. It's a stronger bill than any of the previous versions of DREAM. And essentially what it does is that it creates a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers. First, by creating a conditional permanent residency status, and then adjusting that status to lawful permanent resident, and then and then from there they can apply for U.S. citizenship. Essentially, the idea for the conditional permanent resident status is that if Dreamers came to the U.S. before the age of 18, if they've lived consecutively in the U.S. for 4 years, and if they have either a high school diploma, a GED, or an equivalent degree, they can apply for conditional resident status, along with a few other components like not having certain criminal records or convictions. From there, after 8 years, they can apply to change their status from conditional permanent resident to lawful permanent resident. And it's here in particular that there are a few changes. One, it allows individuals who are not in college who do not have a bachelor's degree or who are not in the military to also get a legal pathway to lawful permanent residency. So, if someone has been working for 3 years, they can also apply for lawful permanent resident status. Additionally, for individuals who cannot work, who cannot go to school, or who cannot be part of the military, there's also the option of hardship waivers that's also included in this bill. So it's a lot more lenient than the previous bills. Two other key parts of the legislation is that for the conditional permanent resident status, the bill allows the Secretary to look at expunged convictions on a case-by-case basis and determine whether or not those would be applied to individuals applying for conditional permanent resident status. And then the other component is that it also allows undocumented students to get access to in-state tuition, and to also be able to attend public universities, and takes out some components of the INA that restricted that.
Thanks, Kham. We're now going to go to Suk Young to talk about national, state, and local strategy and the call for action.
Hi, everybody. So I guess when it comes to strategy, there are some different thoughts about what are the most effective pressure points and what's the most effective strategy. At this point with DACA, there has really been there's been a lot of acknowledgement that because the program is, it is under serious threat, that we need to really focus, that we actually do need to work on this at a national level, at a state, and at a local level, because we know, right, that there's actually broad support for immigrant rights and for young immigrants and for young people. So there are a few interesting ways you could do this. For example, do you know what stance your Attorney General has taken on the DACA program? Here in Virginia, I would say like back in early June, we started to put pressure on our Attorney General to make a public statement in support of DACA. We lobbied his office, and a few weeks later, we find out that actually 20 attorney generals across the country came together and did a public release. So you would want to find out, well, unless you're in one of the 10 states where your attorney general is part of the lawsuit, and even in that case, how do you then communicate with them that is not, that you do not agree with that stance, right? It is for attorney generals that have not yet taken a position. What role can you play to make your attorney general make a public statement? As Kham talked about, the 2017 DREAM Act, it's in the House. The House is called the American Hope Act. Has your legislator, has your representative, have your senators publicly supported, have they co-sponsored DREAM Act? And have they made a statement about DACA, right? And if they have done both of those things, publicly supported DACA or co-sponsored the DREAM Act, then take it a next step. Well, how can they be a champion? Would they be willing to write an op-ed? Would they be willing to maybe come to an event that you've organized and say, I support DACA, I support immigrant youth, and I will defend DACA. we are at NACASEC. We've also been doing this work around having local elected officials publicly support DACA. So whether it's the Fairfax County, so we're in Fairfax County, Virginia, right? So we're talking to the supervisors here to make statements to say that they support DACA. I think what's critical is that, the folks on this call, we all know about the DACA program. There are, as you can, right? Like most people don't know anything about DACA, including elected officials. And so right now is really a great opportunity to educate them and to engage them to take action. I should make a quick note that about Congress, this is a great time to try to meet with your senators and House of Representatives because they are on August congressional recess. And it goes without saying to organize, right? We are not alone in this fight. I hope that you get a sense that, I believe there's like over 100 people on this call. There are a lot of Asian Americans who care about DACA and either are directly impacted or love someone that is directly impacted. Here at NACASEC, what we, after listening to some of our documented youth and, thinking about, well, what are we going to do? Because we can't just sit here and not do anything. We're actually organizing a 22-day, 24-hour-a-day vigil in front of the White House to defend DACA. If you'd like more information, on the slide is the website, www.nacasec.org/act, and we'll also be using the hashtag DreamAction17. So if you are going to be in Washington, D.C., anytime between August 15th to September 5th, we'll be there in front of the White House. If you'd like to talk about doing a local action, I would be happy to share my contact information at the end. And if you're also here in DC on the 15th, we are coordinating with United. We are really happy to be coordinating with United We Dream, who is organizing a major action on the 15th. So we're doing all of this work here in DC in concert. Next slide, please. The last thing I would like to mention around helping to protect DACA. So here, as mentioned again, make noise, right? Call your attorney general, call your representative, call your senator, call your local elected officials to speak out, share why DACA is important. And also, this link that you see here, this BIT link, United We Dream and Professor Tom Wong, they're conducting an anonymous survey of DACA recipients to obtain data and information that is going to be used to defend DACA. You may have heard of Professor Tom Wong. He has done previous research that has been critical in helping us advocate at the local, state, and national level for DACA, and has really formed the foundation of other studies and research. And it's a really powerful tool that we have to expand the coalition of stakeholders protecting DACA. So we really encourage folks, please fill out this survey, encourage other documented community members to do the same, because we want to make sure that Asian American and Pacific Islander voices are part of the strategy behind how to defend DACA, like the organizations that are represented on this call. And we also want to make sure that there are Asian American and Pacific Islander stories that are also visible. And so we'll also be sending a copy of this link in a follow-up email to all webinar participants.
Great, thanks, Dukian. Thanks, Dukian. I want to point out that there are a couple of resources here that you have access to in your webinar control, or your GoToWebinar control panel, and you'll be able to see these documents for your use there. But we have also uploaded a DREAM Act one-page summary, a side-by-side view of the 2010 and 2017 DREAM Acts and DACA, and a section-by-section analysis of the new DREAM bill, as well as a social media toolkit that you all are able to use as you'd like to. I'm going to open it up for questions. On your slide, you'll see all of our email addresses. So if there are any questions that you have that we don't get to or that you think about after, please feel free to get in touch with any of us now after the survey or after the webinar. We're going to start with a couple of questions that we've got. The first one is, what is considered a significant misdemeanor? I'm going to go ahead and ask Megan to take that question.
Hi, so the significant misdemeanor is not something that's in immigration law. It was made up by the DACA program. So it's just listed on U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website. And it says it's a misdemeanor is defined by federal law. So that's something where sentencing is 1 year or less, but greater than 5 days. And it has to meet one of these other criteria. It has to be a crime that's related to domestic violence, sexual abuse or exploitation, burglary, unlawful possession or use of a firearm, drug distribution or trafficking, or driving under the influence, or it's any crime for which the individual was sentenced to time in custody of more than 90 days. So, you know, where we see more commonly folks excluded from the program are the DUIs and drug-related crimes, I think.
Great, thanks, Megan. Another question we had was, what was the date of the action in DC? And that's August 15th. And want to remind you all that you can either, if you'd like to be unmuted to ask a question, you can raise your hand on the GoToWebinar on your control panel, or you can also type a question into the chat box, and we are able to answer them that way. The next question is from someone from California. I'm from California. How can I help locally? I'm going to ask Suk Young to answer.
For the individual who is from California, there are a number of things that you can do. So, for example, without knowing which part of California you're from, you would want to see, has my representative, have my senators, I believe the senators have, but have they sponsored the DREAM Act? And and more importantly, in some ways, have they actually made any public statement about DACA? So whether that means, and yourself, right? Would you be willing to write an op-ed, do a letter to the editor, to really try to get the word out there about DACA and its and what the dire repercussions would be if it were to be canceled. There are, depending on where you are in California, there are also a number of local organizations who are likely going to be organizing local actions on August 15th. So showing up to those and then staying connected with them so that a California strategy can move forward. And lastly, depending on where you are in California, getting your local elected officials as well to speak up for DACA. All of that would help greatly, immensely, particularly if they're Republicans. That's, one of the thinking right now is that we really need to show President Trump and this administration that there is a wide range of voices. So whether it's faith voices, Asian American voices, that care and are working to defend DACA.
Thanks, Suk Young. Roxana, from Drum, we've unmuted your line to make an announcement.
Sure, thank you. Hi, this is Roxana. I'm an organizer with Drum, DC's Rising Up and Moving in New York City. I just wanted to make an announcement about an action that we're co-organizing here in New York City on August 15th. It is also about defending DACA since the 5th year anniversary of the DACA program. but also for the immigrant movement to look towards like the future of other programs like temporary protected status that a lot of our immigrant communities, including API folks, are vulnerable to losing, or some folks already have. So we're connecting these two issues together, and it's going to be on Tuesday outside of Trump Tower, because President Trump will actually be visiting New York City for the week, and he's the target that we're choosing. And we're also looking for this action to lay the groundwork for further community actions between now and up to September 5th, when there's a ruling on the case and the potential lawsuit to come afterwards. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Roxana. I see we have Nora Cardona. Do you have a question? We're about to unmute your line.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have a question. I don't know if I accidentally raised my hand on the. Apologies.
That's okay. No problem. Thanks, Nora. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box or raise your hand.
Nisha, can I say something? This is Megan. Yeah. There's a letter circulating that's from in support of DACA from civic leaders, all kinds of civic leaders, EDs of nonprofits, elected officials, you know, police chiefs, anybody who's sort of high profile in your community. So that's another thing to ask folks to do on DACA. So people can email me if they'd like that link, and I'll share it with the NCAPA list right now.
Great, thanks, Megan. One last question we got was around talking points. If any of our organizations have talking points when we speak or when folks speak to, you know, public officials, attorney generals, and other politicians. Is there anyone on the panel that would like to take that question?
I think Suk-Young, didn't NACA send a letter to the Virginia Attorney General? Is that maybe a model that you'd be able to share out with folks that we can maybe email out after the webinar?
Yeah, sure. We sent it in partnership with a group that we work a lot with. Mason Dreamers is a group of impacted young people at George Mason University.
Great. We'll make sure to send that out as a model after the webinar. Are there any other panelists that want to weigh in on the talking points question? Okay, if not, I will go to another question we got. As a teacher, are there resources and fact sheets for me to provide students on information on how this affects college applications, or dispel any myths about college applications as DACA is in flux?
There are. This is Megan again. I have to find it, and I can give it to you, Nisha, for follow-up to send to the list.
Great. We will make sure to collect all of these items from our panelists and send them out after the webinar for everyone's use. What local actions are taking place in San Francisco or the Bay Area?
So are there any folks from the San Francisco or Bay Area on the line that may want to offer any actions happening in their area? You could raise your hand or send me an answer to the chat box, and we can help connect folks. We also have another question, logistics. How can I save handouts that are in your panel? I believe you could just click on the link and you should be able to send it through, save it to your computer. But if you're unable to do that and you're having issues, you can shoot me an email at katrina@crac.org, and I could email those directly to you.
Okay, are there any other questions that folks want to ask? We have a little bit of time left if people have any follow-up questions. Or if the panelists have any additional resources that they'd like to flag for folks, we can do that as well.
For any, someone asked a question on fact sheets for engagement, again, to provide to students. If you'd like that, more of those resources, you can email Megan. Her email address is on the screen, and she can forward you some resources from United We Dream. Any other questions from folks?
It looks like we have one other question. Let's see, is there a website where current info is available? I mean, I would definitely say, you know, most of the organizations that we have panelists from on this call, as well as some of the other co-sponsoring organizations, definitely are, you know, speaking out when we're seeing issues around DACA and on DREAM. So, you know, in terms of press statements and things like that, you can continue to check their website, all of our websites. And in the meantime, I think, you know, looking at some of the, like, I think on the call to action slide, there was some information there as well from United We Dream. So I would also definitely put that out there as a central place for folks to get more information on this issue. Oh, we have a question from Angelo to the other panelists. What happens if DACA gets rescinded or phased out? What would happen next? Or what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, Megan, can you maybe talk a little bit about the litigation?
Well, I mean, I guess the scenarios are, there's two, like the worst case scenario is that they end people's DACA immediately rather than letting it go until its end date, which could be, you know, anywhere from this month till 2 years, because it's renewable every 2 years. And so I think that's the direction we think that they would likely go in, at least the administration would go in, is to let it run its course, and so that people aren't just losing their work authorization and DACA all in one day, which would cause, I think, be more of a crisis, because at least for a lot of folks, we'd have a little time to, you know, get out information to the community about what's going to happen, whether it's their jobs or, you know, their education. So it would be better if we have, you know, more time. I think either way, as I think Suk Young mentioned, definitely folks are getting ready to sue the administration under various theories. I'm not a litigator, so I'm not sure what all the theories are, but I think there's some theories around reliance because the government created this program and gave people benefits, even though the administration has tried to say they're not benefits. And, you know, it's a benefit that they have work authorization, and people are going to lose those benefits. And so there are some arguments to be made about that people deserve due process before they lose those benefits, et cetera. So certainly folks are going to be looking, and I think there may have already been a lawsuit filed to try to get a better, more reasonable judge in another court, not in the south of Texas, to declare that their DACA actually can't be stripped, at least not immediately. So there will be lots of probably court cases. But I don't know if Angelo or Suk Young have more information on that. And I'll just add, to be not super bleak, because I think it's also important, is that folks are certainly, there's already been a lot of research, particularly by United We Dream, about, you know, how can people work without work authorization. In many cases, you know, I wouldn't talk to the media about this, but in many cases, it's like setting up, being their own company, or being independent contractors. And so folks will be looking for ways for people, if they lose their work authorization, to continue working in their fields, and resources on that.
Great, thanks, Megan. One other question we got, are there things that folks can do to influence the executive branch, not just the legislative?
I think one thing folks could do is participate in all of these actions happening that, United We Dream and NACASEC is organizing. I feel like that 2-week vigil in front of the White House going on 24 hours a day would definitely send a clear message to this administration. Continuing to engage with this administration, we know that President Trump loves Twitter, and kind of, lending support to the Dreamers and knowing that, we won't go down without a fight, and kind of putting the pressure on them, I think would be helpful. And I don't know if my fellow panelists have anything else to add.
NACASEC is circulating a petition to go to the White House, again, to show how wide there is the support for the for DACA. And really, what folks are saying too is if there are local leaders or local, kind of like what may be considered unlikely supporters of DACA. So say it's was mentioned earlier, like a police chief, maybe it's a business or a chamber of commerce, some faith organization, right? Again, all for them to speak out for DACA, and then sharing that kind of information, say with your senators, with your representatives, because they're whether they are already on board with supporting DACA or if they're not, then they start to feel the pressure. And then certainly if they start to feel the pressure, they're going to put the pressure on the executive branch as well.
Great, thanks. One question we have was, would it be risky to renew my license if it expires in 2 months? I don't know if that is in reference to DACA or not, but maybe Sokyung, if you'd be able to just answer that question, that'd be great.
Here in Virginia, at least, the various immigration legal aid service organizations who we work with, we are, so if it's a renewal, we are suggesting that folks put in their renewals now. For DACA renewals, they tend, folks tend to submit them anywhere from 6 to 9 months before the expiration date anyway. So if you're only 2 months out, you should submit your DACA renewal now.
Thanks, Sokyung. A message we received from Kathy from the Educators for Fair Consideration in San Francisco. Tomorrow night, they're convening members to share reactions to news about DACA and DREAM, particularly given the large amount of emotions around this, including fear, anxiety, guilt, uncertainty, and hope. They're finding it very necessary to create a space for people to share these emotions before pushing them to public action. If anyone is in the Bay Area and would be interested in this event or would like to invite undocumented young people to attend the event, you can reach out to Kathy. Her email address is Kathy, Kathy, @e4fc.org. And we'll do one last call for any questions that folks may have.
Again, feel free to raise your hand if you want to be unmuted, or you could type us a question in the chat box.
Hey, this is Megan. Can I just follow up on the question about licenses? I think folks should get, if it's about their driver's license, also get advice from a community organization in their state, either legal aid or another community-based organization. So you can feel free to email me if you don't know somebody near you already, and I can help you find someone.
Thanks, Megan. If there are no more questions, You have all of our email addresses on the screen, and all of us are more than happy to talk with you if you have questions outside of this webinar. I want to remind all of you to please answer the post-webinar survey that you will be receiving after this ends. And with that, I want to give a big thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of you for joining us. And we hope this was helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.